Hi, you're watching Shauna with Shauna Italia, and today we'll be talking about one coping skill that I have used and have helped other people use to help stop the trauma loop that happens in our brains once we are triggered. Before I go any further, please go ahead and click the like and subscribe button down below so that you don't miss any of the videos that I am putting out. So now that we are looking at, it's still far off in the future if you look at the date of this video, but we are looking at COVID ending, the crisis ending sometime in the future. And like I've said before in other videos, I think that this will be the time when people start actually being able to deal with their trauma. Normally, PTSD symptoms demonstrate themselves when the person feels safe. So one of the misconceptions about PTSD is that especially for people who have never worked with it before, never studied it, they don't usually understand, bystanders don't usually understand why people with PTSD randomly get triggered and why they are experiencing things in real time now that they were experiencing before but couldn't deal with. And the reason for that is that our brains are so smart and so well programmed that they protect us first before letting us process what they're protecting us from. For instance, if we had a woman in the military who was fighting over in one of the wars, and she was the only one out of her unit who survived an attack, I would imagine that she would not be able to process that while she's getting out of danger, and she probably wouldn't be processing that until she got somewhere familiar, which is probably not the war zone. So essentially something that may have happened to someone 2 months ago, but they don't come home and deal with it in like a military setting. They don't come home and deal with it until they get back. It usually still takes a little bit of time for them to really start to work through the patterns that have developed and like the neural pathways that were triggered in order to protect them. And that's essentially what PTSD is for us. In the United States, I think a lot of us are still on sort of high alert, in survival mode, still in either a mode where we are trying to ignore what's happening, or we're too involved in what's happening, or we're trying to control things that we can't control. And our brains are doing that so that we can survive the pandemic, because we're getting, if you turn on the news or look at the internet even, we're getting all these messages that people are dying, which implies that we're going to die, and our brains really pick up on that because the human body is designed to not want to die, and that includes our brain. So we are biologically being programmed and cognitively being programmed to be in fight and flight all the time. I don't know whether or not this is done on purpose. That might be something that we talk about later after this is over, but for now, I want you guys to start practicing these skills so that when we stop dealing with a huge influx of information about COVID-19, that you guys will be prepared and already have the skills and have practiced the skills that you will need in order to start to properly deal with what your brain has been doing this entire time. For most of us, it will be almost over a year that our brain has been looping. And so I suspect that a large majority of people over the summer, if everything goes as planned with the vaccine, and into the fall, will start experiencing things that they don't quite understand. And it is my hypothesis that a lot of these things are going to be trauma triggers and related to our brains trying to figure all of this out. And the more time that goes by, the more we have to figure out. So it's going to take probably twice as long for us as a society, maybe even 3 times as long for us as a society to get back cognitively to whatever normal will be. But I don't want for you guys to get floored by that. I don't want for you to be unprepared when you're dealing with that. I want you to understand what's happening so that you don't judge yourself and you don't judge others, that you can treat yourself with compassion, that you can treat other people with compassion, and hopefully use some of these skills to help your community of loved ones, or even people you don't like, but you're just a compassionate person and you're helping them anyway, deal with this, because there's going to be a lot of confusion about what is happening next for us, and that unknown also adds to the likelihood that most of us are still operating in a situation that registers in our central nervous systems as dangerous. So this skill is kind of a lengthy skill, but it really is one of the best, and it's designed to get the blood flow from back here. So back here is basically our evolutionary brain. It is the area of the brain behind your head that lights up and overrides everything else. So it kind of flows up. So to override everything else, any type of reasoning we have, any type of planning we can do, any type of really specific cognitive functioning will get flooded and then won't work because it's being flooded by the neurons in the back to protect us. So it's kind of like shutting off the computer to fix the hardware, shutting off the computer when you know there's going to be a huge lightning storm, and trying to protect it from getting fried. It's basically the same thing. So if we saw a bear walk in the room, we are biologically programmed to stop thinking and just start doing, or freezing. So fight, flight, or freeze. So it's like you run, you stop and you stare because you really actually literally can't plan what to do, or you fight because that's what your brain decided is best based on the limited amount of information it was able to collect before it fired up the neurons to the front of your brain. So what we want to do is get the blood from back here to recede back, and then make more blood and put more energy up here in the fronts of our brain so that we can start actually working through all of the things that are happening, because, well, it's actually lots of parts that we'll be working with, but you know, if you're having trouble planning, if you're having trouble organizing, if you're having trouble thinking ahead, if you're having trouble with recall of words and other various things, it's very likely that you might be experiencing the trauma helmet. Maybe I'll call it that, the trauma helmet, the override. So I want you to be prepared for that. Okay, so the first thing that we do with this skill, there are several steps, but the first step is that you ask yourself or the other person, where am I? Where am I? And that might seem a little bit silly, but what it does is, again, it brings you back to the situation here, which will start triggering the front of your brain. So for me, for example, I'm in my office, and then what I usually do is add on to that and say, okay, well, what am I touching? I'm touching my leg. I have my leg crossed a little. I'm touching my leg. How does that feel? It feels warm. So anything to bring me back into this moment. And then the second question I ask myself is, where was I when this trauma occurred? So for, let's say, COVID, when I first heard about it, I was downstairs in the same house. So this separates it already starts separating my brain. If I'm in my office instead of, let's say, in the kitchen, then my brain's going to start recognizing, hey, these are two different situations. These are two different places. What applies to the kitchen doesn't necessarily apply to the office. And you can already see, just based on the language, sort of the way that my front brain already has started doing the analysis, which requires more blood to flow to the front. Okay, so where was I? I was in the kitchen. What was I doing? I don't remember, if I'm going to be honest. And so then if I don't remember, I can't go forward and ask myself what I was touching, because I have no idea. And then the second question is, when did this incident occur, this trauma occur? It occurred for me, it started in February of 2020. The more specific you can be, the better. For major life events like assaults and things that happen in war or traveling or whatever, car accidents, it's easier to remember the exact time. I don't remember the exact time, but I can tell you the month and the year, and that was February 2020. And then I asked myself, okay, so what date is it now? Okay, well, at the time of this filming, it is January the 4th, I think. That was my shoulder that just popped. The 4th of 2021. It might be the 3rd, I have no idea, but it is January of 2021. And so already my brain has had to go, oh, this danger sequence doesn't belong in the time period that we're in right now. So now it's able to separate. So where it was flooded before, it starts to separate and dry up and starts to recede back to where your powerhouse of survival needs to go and rest. So that would be the second question. The third question is, who was involved in the trauma? So who was it? And in the case of COVID, I would say that it was the media. I would say that it was, I say who? I would say it was the media. I would say it was the CDC. And I would say that it was China. And so who caused the trauma? We didn't really know. So I would actually probably, if I were doing this in real life, I'd probably say, you know what, we don't know who. We don't know who caused this at that moment. But now we do. Now we know, and that's what you do. You ask yourself, okay, well, who's involved now? And maybe even in this situation, what information has changed? Okay, well, now we know that it came from Wuhan. Now we know how it spreads. Now we know what it's called even, because I don't even know that we had a name that we'd really embraced as a collective until later in February. But those are basically the questions that surround who was involved. If you were talking about, let's say, like a traumatic event like a sexual assault, then of course you would say, I was at a party. If you were at a party and these 3 friends were there that I thought were friends, and this is the person who perpetrated, and then you would ask yourself, okay, well, who is here now? And again, that brings the blood further up here. So we're building this layer of reasoning back. So who is here now? Well, there's nobody. Do I listen to the CDC all the time? Honestly, no, I don't, because I feel like we don't know anything more than we knew like a few months ago that they're sharing with us. And so then I can move on, because what I've done is I've recognized that what I was doing at the time of the trauma and who I was with is not the same as what I'm doing right now and who I'm with. I'm with you. So that's amazing. And I maybe I've never been with you before. Maybe you're one of my lovely favorite people who support me no matter what. Listening, I'm here with you. And so then once you go through all of those questions so that your brain learns how to separate, then you ask, is there an actual threat in the room? So what I normally do, even though it seems silly, is I normally literally look around the room, because again, I'm trying to program my brain, look around the room and see if there's anything literally in this moment in time trying to kill me. Literally in this moment that I can see. And right now it looks like I'm pretty safe. There aren't any bears, there aren't any people with guns, there's no one trying to sneeze on me. Sorry, that was a bad joke. But nobody's actively trying to hurt me. So then I ask my brain, or I ask myself, okay, well, is there a perceived threat right now in this room? So I look around it again, no matter how many times I've done this, so that my eyes and my brain and my blood can line up. And the answer is no, there is not a perceived threat. By the time you get here, which I probably should do another video where I like list out the questions, but by the time you get here, you are actually going to have triggered your brain out of the loop and into the present. Okay, thanks guys, bye.